Welcome to the NSI podcast, where technology, innovation, and strategy come together to empower today's IT leaders. Today, we're joined by Vicki Farnsworth, Chief Information Officer at the University of Mississippi. Vicki's journey spans from Purdue University and UT Chattanooga to leading one of the South's most forward-thinking university IT organizations. We'll talk about how she approaches leadership and innovation, the opportunities and pitfalls of AI in higher education, and how she balances security, academic integrity, and human connection in a digital world. This episode is packed with insights you don't want to miss. We'll start off with you sharing a little bit about your path into IT and higher education and how you got to Ole Miss.
Yeah, so that's kind of a long story, I guess. So I had gone to Purdue in genetics microbiology, got about 3.5 years in and realized I didn't love it. And rather than continue to pay for school, I decided to take a job at the university on the business side of the house, reviewing research proposals in that subject matter before they went out to the federal government. So it was considered business function of the university. And I'd been there probably 2 years, and the director came to me and said, "We're starting this program to create our own IT people, and we want you to be a part of this program." So they literally took me out of my role, and I spent an entire summer taking 6 classes from morning until night, and we would do homework after we got done. So sometimes we'd be in the computer labs till past midnight doing homework, and then I would get up and do the same thing the next day. And so then after that, I became an IT person at the university, and I worked my way. I wrote software that ran parts carousels for inventory. I wrote software that did payroll for policemen and firemen, because in universities, they often have their own police and fire, and they don't get paid like 8 to 5 people. And so really went over to the IT side of the house. And then at one point in time, my leader, the CIO at the time, said, "Now you've never been on the research side of the house, so we want you to go be part of this nanotechnology research grant." So for 5.5 years, I was the managing director for the Network for Computational Nanotechnology. That was a cyber infrastructure that provided nanotechnology teaching and simulation to the world. And so I did that for 5.5 years. Came back after that and did ERP to cloud. I was responsible for the business, HR, finance, all of the applications, and did a ERP to cloud. And then after that, I decided that it was really time for that next step. So at UT Chat, I reported up to the chancellor. So I got to move up in reporting line and be the CIO, reporting to him directly. While I was at UT Chat, the portfolio is quite a bit smaller because there's a system in Tennessee. But I got the opportunity. I was the CFO for 9 months while we filled that position. I was in marketing and communications as their vice chancellor twice, just to help fill the position, ran the radio station. So I did lots of things at UT Chat too. And then got a reach out about this position at Mississippi and came on campus. And I think that the skill set and the variety that I have gotten to experience in my lifetime fit in well with what they needed. And here we are, a couple months in, about 3 months in. So it's been an exciting, fun journey. I've gotten to be part of so many cool things and meet so many great people.
Wow.
Well,
that's impressive. All the different things, you can feel where you're needed,
Yeah, thank you.
It is impressive. You said you got the call that there was interest at the University of Mississippi, and you went on campus. I've got to tell you, having been on quite a few campuses in my day, just because of the line of work that I do, Oxford, man, that's probably one of the prettiest campuses in the country. And so it's kind of hard to go there and just not kind of feel the romance of Oxford. And so I bet that's it's definitely at least that part of it would be kind of a neat thing, going on campus for the first time and seeing Oxford. So, well, this is more of kind of a leadership question, but what are some of the pivotal moments or challenges in your career that shaped your leadership style?
Well, there were so many. I've had the benefit of being at large institutions, and then as we talked earlier, you run into people. But one of my favorite leadership moments, I was on the research side of the house, and up until that moment, I'd spent probably 15 years as on the administrative side of Purdue. And here I am in the research side. I'm hiring grad students. I'm bringing in undergraduate students from all over the world. And one of the grad students, a PhD in electrical engineering, came to me one day. And, I had a million things going on. And he came in and I could tell he was really upset. And I was part of hiring him. And so he felt connected. So he came in and he sat down and he was telling me that one of his mentors that had helped him through undergraduate engineering program was in very seriously ailing health. And he didn't know how to handle it. He'd never really dealt with death before. And most of the people that he looked up to were not in this country. And so he told me he was afraid to even go see his mentor because he knew the end was imminent. And he asked me what he should do. And I sat down with him and took a moment and told him to write a letter. I said, write down all of the things that you want to say to your mentor and then take that letter to him. And he did. And not long after he did that, his mentor died. And he came back to me in my office. Again, busy day, people in and out. And he kneeled at my feet and he kissed my feet. And at that moment, like, it's impossible to describe. I'm from in the middle of nowhere, Indiana, right? That's where I am. And such a powerful international moment. And I went, and after he left, and then he gave me a hug too. And after he left, I went and talked to some of our other faculty that are Indian. And I asked them what that meant. And they expressed to me how high of an honor that was, that in that moment, it didn't matter to him that I had no idea what he was doing, or I didn't expect it, but I had an impact on him. And I think in higher ed, those moments where it's not about, I did this great IT thing, or I did this thing, you helped a human through a tough time. And I think that's really what our role is. So as I think about my leadership style, it's about the impact. How do I take what I know on the IT side? So one of the things we were doing in Chattanooga, and we did it at Purdue too, how do you look at the data that you know about students? Students that are supposed to be in face-to-face classes, students who haven't hit a wired or wireless connection on campus, they haven't done a meal swipe, they haven't gone to the gym, they haven't logged in when they should be logging in. So you can really start to get to students that need the resources more than other students. And so I think part of my leadership style is bringing together what we know about people from their behavior and from IT to help have that broader impact. So that's probably one of my most powerful leadership moments.
I guess the question I would say is, how'd you keep it together, or did you not? Like, I probably would have gotten pretty emotional in that situation.
I got emotional just listening.
Yeah, I know it was. I was just like, golly, why are you telling that story, Vicki? I'm not trying to get misty on this thing.
I know. I think I have the added benefit of having slow reflexes. And so I react quickly, but I take in a bunch of information. And so in that moment, just because of his body language, I knew that this, it was better for me just to calm down a little bit and take a moment back and appreciate that moment. But it's not always easy for high-strung people to do, but I was able to in that moment.
That's fair. Go ahead, Cassie.
Wow, that was a good story. Thank you for sharing that. And with humans now and interactions, some things are awkward, and that was just a moment that he was just raw, and and you accepted that. That's a beautiful moment. But we're going to talk about AI, because I know you have some past experience with AI. Was that your last position?
Yeah, so that was in Chattanooga. We came together. The chancellor came to me, and it was me because I started, I'm an IT person, but I came to IT through the business, right? So I think about it from a business perspective. And he knew that if you went too far academic with AI, you might not get to some of the operational efficiencies that you can achieve on the administrative side of the house. And so I think that was one of the reasons why he came to me, to kind of really put together that plan for AI. And I was also well connected in Chattanooga into the community. So I knew what TVA was doing with AI. I knew what EPB was doing and some of the other companies, the insurance companies. And so how do you kind of become that person that can come out and talk about it from a very, very practical perspective?
Okay. Well, what are some of the most promising AI use cases you've seen across universities so far?
I would say and I just got back from another meeting of CIOs of the SEC schools, and they're in very, very differing levels of maturity, I would say. But there's also Vanderbilt jumped out ahead, and the president there took a computer science faculty member, pulled him out and had him report directly to him. And what they did immediately was start to put together some courses in Coursera to get information out there. And by the time I heard about Jules White, there was probably 350,000 people that had already signed up and gone through his course. And so from a Chattanooga perspective, it really became, how do we look at the community and engagement? How do we help our students become as conversant as they leave the university and move into their roles? But our focus really became about telling the stories. There were a lot of really great faculty that jumped out ahead. And there was a sculpture faculty member, for example, who would think that that was one of our first use cases. So his goal was just awareness. So he had students do a sculpture as assignment 1. Assignment 2 was to go into AI and prompt AI to create an image of that sculpture. So they were learning about prompting and talking to AI in a way to get something that they achieved. Then they took the results of those images and incorporated them back as to into the sculpture. So it was a really cool way for them to incorporate it into something you would not normally associate with AI. We had nursing faculty members that taught students to run their case notes through AI to make sure as they're submitted into medical record forever, they're thinking about making sure they're complete, clear, and unbiased as much as they possibly could. And so I think there was some getting at those stories of faculty who jumped out ahead to use AI. That was one of the ways then we were able to gather all that and take that into the community and then help the community become more aware as well. So it was a really great, our effort was called CHI. It was called Chattanooga's AI Initiative. And we wanted AI to be comfortable, like a warm cup of tea. We didn't want it to be something that people were afraid of. I remember going into first discussions with student government, and students were already thinking that we were, as a university, preparing them for degrees or for jobs that would be very different. And so it was calming some students down too, to say, we'll teach you these skills, but we're going to teach you about critical thinking so that whatever the technology is, that is the flavor of the day, you would be able to take advantage of it because you knew how to think through it. So that was really, there were lots of different efforts that were focused, but it was really on a lot of it was on individual productivity. So how do we help procurement look at contracts? How do we help policies? Like there's one of the best use cases was uploading a travel policy and then having an assistant that you could ask questions. Well, can I fly business class? Well, no, not unless you get prior approval. So I think there were some really good use cases of just practical use that just jumped out and were great ways for us to leverage the technology.
So where do you see the line between helpful automation and academic integrity concerns when it comes to generative AI? and I know this has been talked about a lot. I have 3 daughters in a university here in Arkansas, and this is kind of I would just say from their feedback, the professors are kind of all over the board on. Some are all in, embracing, others are hyper reluctant and almost belligerent towards it. I'd like to understand where you see the line on that, and if you see anybody who's kind of really promoting some good ideas.
Yeah, one of our partners, or one of the main teams on that AI effort, was the teaching and learning space. And they did a great job jumping out ahead with faculty and helping them look at their course assignments and figure out ways to plug in AI so that it becomes part of the learning, and not students using it without permission. And so jumping out ahead and helping faculty redesign courses. But I have seen, there was a history faculty member, for example, that I engaged with in Chattanooga, that told me that she could not be sure that students were achieving the outcomes if there was any AI use involved. And there was no way she was going to redo her assignments. So how do you incentivize people to do the right thing? So I think the faculty that are ahead and the students that are going to be ahead are being taught by faculty who are thinking outside of the box and using the technology in a way that helps them learn and critically think, rather than punish them after the fact when they use it, right? We've been using things like Grammarly for years to help us write sentences better. I know when I was in my ed.D program, it was hugely beneficial to think about how I might organize a discussion and give me ideas on how to get started rather than write it for me. One of the things we did very recently at Ole Miss is we probably are a little bit behind here in AI and how it's used. We don't even have a policy yet on governing the use of it. But we did an outbound in the middle of the night, like from 9 o'clock at night till 6 a.m. in the morning. I asked the team, what can you tell me about AI usage overnight? Because most likely it's going to be students, right? Because they're working all night. And just that amount of time, there were 100,000 calls, DNS calls, outbound calls to AI services. And over 80% of them were to OpenAI ChatGPT. So that tells us that as a university, we are a Microsoft shop. We license Copilot. We've licensed some other tools that some other departments are using. Quill is one of them. It helps with writing. And invariably, everyone's using OpenAI, most likely. So, that just goes, that's where we kind of use the data behind the scenes to help us understand behavior, so then we can go back in, because there are faculty and administrators on this campus that believe if we go out and promote a tool like Gemini from Google, and Google's trying to promote Gemini, if we go promote a certain tool, that means that we support the usage of it. But I'm saying they're using it anyway, so it's better for us to be out in front and tell them what acceptable use is and really start to educate them and help them be aware.
That's good.
That's good. Well, what do you think the biggest opportunities and pitfalls are there with AI?
Yeah, I think the biggest opportunities really are around efficiency and really low-level repetitive work. The thing that makes me the most nervous, and one of the things we really get into agentic AI, where you think about a bot that would go out and book an entire trip for you, meaning it has your credit card information. It has all of your different airlines, because it's going to go shop at American or Delta, whatever might be best, and it's going to book your hotel. So that's where the world is headed, to that agentic AI, where it's really going to automate an entire workflow or process, and it's going to have a lot of access to your data as that happens. And so are the right security protocols in place for something like that? And I think we've proven very recently with some of the AI services that they may not be as secure as they need to be to handle that kind of thing. So people need to be really thoughtful, where I'm all about convenience, right? Like Alexa orders things for me whenever I need dog food. Alexa knows before I do, and it just shows up. So I think that there are some great conveniences in AI as an opportunity, but then balancing that with the amount of security required to keep your data and your identity safe. And I think we're really going to be butting up against that.
Right.
I had a news clipping from People. I guess it's published on October the 26th, but the headline says AI system at high school mistakes bag of chips for a weapon. And the police allegedly handcuffed an innocent teen at gunpoint. This is actually in a high school in Maryland. I think it was actually Baltimore. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I start thinking about, there's a movie coming out. I don't know if you've heard about it, called Mercy. It's about an AI judge, and it's starring Chris Pratt. But you talked about moving too fast on some things, or maybe you didn't, maybe Cassie did, but how do we make determinations, not only at the university level, but just as a society? How do we make that determination when and where we should trust AI, and when and where should we not trust AI?
That's a really good question. I think when it comes to not trusting AI, it's when it has too much access to things that you are not comfortable with it having access to. And it's making decisions on your behalf, and you're unsure of how it's making those decisions. So, there's always still a human brain in the middle. And keeping that in mind, even as it's booking a trip for me, right? Like, what kind of review are you as a human putting in place? Or how many of us would just completely let any one service book for us, right? Like, even with a travel agent, you're going back and forth. So losing that ability to have that dialogue and interaction, that's when I get a little bit worried, when people are letting it make blanket decisions on their behalf on something that gives it too much access. So that's what I would be thoughtful about myself personally.
Right.
I had a follow-up question. This one's not on the AI topic. You're like, yay, I'm done with that. But actually, I was very excited having you on the podcast, because you obviously had a lot more AI experience than some of the people that we've talked to in the past, and part of that just had a lot to do with AI was just really coming into its own, I think, earlier in the year. But I'm going to shift gears to cybersecurity. It's always a concern. How do you approach securing student, faculty data and responding when an incident occurs?
I think one of the strategies I've used at all institutions, I think one of the things I learned is there isn't one small group that can do every piece of it. So you have to find places where you can get assistance. For example, in Chattanooga, couldn't afford a CISO at the right level, right? So if someone could be a CISO at UT Chattanooga, or they could go in the same community and work for TVA, who's going to pay better, right? When you're protecting utilities,
Yeah.
they're going to pay better. And I would say TVA has probably one of the most formidable security operations centers that I've ever seen. And so from a university perspective, Purdue was always part of the OmniSoc, which was Big Ten coming together, and each university in the Big Ten that joined in had an expertise. So finding those pockets of expertise where you can learn from someone who either is deeper in a particular area or has more to protect. Health centers, for example, UT Health Science Center always had they had more staff dedicated to cybersecurity than UT Chat. So how do you find those places with the resources rather than trying to do it all yourself? Universities that struggle are the ones that try to do it themselves. There were faculty members at UT Chat that had been doing work in reliability of power grids and from a cyber perspective, and they would help us. I would get assistance from UT Health Science Center. So same thing at Ole Miss, right? What are we going to be really strong at? And where do we have to lean on other people for their expertise? So when it comes to incident response, there are a lot of university IT people that love to dig into incidents just because of the nature of they're curious. And so they really want to understand what happened. But timeliness is of the essence when it comes to an incident. And so understanding how big of a breach it was and how you're going to respond, that's often way better done by a third party. So bringing in third party resources when you need to is really the right mix for me. And when I was at the SEC CIO meeting, I just found out that LSU offers up a SOC service, a 24/7, and that is one thing that we've been unable to staff here at Ole Miss. So how do we leverage what LSU is doing or what Mississippi State's doing from a cyber perspective? Again, to me, there's strength in numbers here, and aligning tool sets will help from a buying power, and then it also helps from that response perspective. And most times response is better done by a third party.
Okay. Well, how do you foster innovation, experimentation, and continuous improvement within your team?
I do that by spending a lot of time with not just my direct reports, but their direct reports and their direct reports. So I've had a lot of luck in my career by really connecting at all levels in the organization with top performers and people that really boots on the ground that see where the opportunities for innovation are. It's really easy in IT to want to build innovation for the sake of innovation. But if it doesn't solve a problem or there isn't a need for it, then it's just going to be, it isn't as much build it and they will come. So staying connected to different levels in the organization, as well as listening to customers, students, deans, faculty. And then when you do have ideas, giving some time for those technical people to focus on their ideas. We used to have a concept called Dead Week at Purdue, and we would give tech people a week. Be like, for that week, we're going to do our best to leave operations like other people can do operations, and people would come up with ideas. They would write code. They would do things that may not be exactly in their everyday role, but they knew this was their time to really get out and be innovative. And then at the end of that week, sometimes there were great ideas that we could go and implement more broadly. And sometimes it was just they got a week to go focus on something they thought was cool. That's enough, right? It helps with productivity. It helps them feel like they're contributing. But almost always, invariably, there were some great ideas that came out of it. So giving people that time to focus and also work in different areas, right? So when people feel like they're being developed and they feel like someone's putting a stake in their ability to move forward, their productivity goes through the roof. So always just finding people and get them outside of their role seems to have been the thing that's worked for me in my past.
Yeah, it's in the past, I've worked for Hewlett Packard and some other large companies, and that was one thing that was always encouraged, was trying to involve people in other departments, at least from an operational standpoint, right? And that always seemed to have a lot of good benefit. It does two things. Not only are you learning something else that's helping you develop maybe new skill sets, encourage you to have interest in something new, but also it gives you a respect for what those other groups are doing, because invariably, and I lead a lot of engineers, and God help them, they would beat me up if I said anything bad about them, so I won't on the podcast. But engineers, they get very linear sometimes, and when they're working on one thing, this is what I do. This is what I do better than anybody. I'm doing my thing, and sometimes they'll get a little bit of a prima donna complex about what they do, and not only is it the main thing, but it's also they do it. It's hard, right? What I do is the hardest, and what I do is the most important. So when you expose them to some other groups, right? Sometimes you let the networking group talk to the data group. You're like, man, these guys are actually pretty smart over on the data side. So I like that. I like some of those concepts. We don't do that as much as I'd like to at Next Step Innovation. We used to have something called innovation hours. We probably should bring that back, Cassie.
I was just thinking about that. We used to do it like once a month.
We did it once a month.
It was fun to hear like your colleagues and their ideas, and especially since we're remote now, it's just nice to have a normal conversation about ideas and not just work.
Something that's super tactical.
Yeah, it's easy to get wrapped up in operations, right?
Oh my gosh, right.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the innovation killer sometimes.
It is.
Tyranny of the urgent, I think is what I've heard it called. But
that's a great way to describe it. Tyranny of the urgent.
Right. How do you balance and maintain yourself? How do you avoid burnout and stay refreshed when you're leading a large and complex IT organization?
One of the strategies, so I am, I've had to learn over time when to let go of something, right? So I think teaching yourself, when you try to make progress, I had a leader that described it as we're all pushing Jell-O, right? And the minute you step away from that Jell-O, it goes right back, right? And so I always have this image of myself, and I'll be pushing the Jell-O.
It's a great image, by the way.
It is.
Yeah.
I'll have to thank Doug Foster for that one. He's in South Carolina.
Okay.
But it's one of those things where sometimes I'll be pushing the Jell-O so hard, and then I'm not making any progress, right? So I have to step back and take a moment and come up with a new approach, right? But there are even times where you kind of do that back, and you come back to the Jell-O and you're pushing, and you have to realize that this is not the time for that piece of Jell-O to move. So I think I've had to learn over time, because I'm like a dog with a bone. If I think something is the right thing to do, it's hard for me to understand why other people don't agree. I've presented the data, I've presented the case. And so sometimes knowing in yourself that there are places where you're not going to make progress, and there are partners you're not going to be able to bring along with you. And sometimes it's admitting that to yourself, and then kind of backing away and realizing it's okay and it's time to heal, but then find something new to go after that might have just as much impact, if not more. And so for me, the refreshing comes from leading teams through that very same process, right? It doesn't, I'm not the one that's going to make impact here. It's convincing other leaders to take on particular things. One of the things that I was proud of at UT Chattanooga, esports started from the ground up. It started with students. We had a Call of Duty team that was ranked like in the top 10, they're probably 12th to 15th in the country. And it was grassroots. And then the university, we made it a push right after COVID. We were trying to get them new space and new machines. And then I remember right before I left, my associate CIO, who's now the CIO there, we were talking, and he was telling me a story, and there was a faculty member in engineering, or I'm sorry, in English, who was teaching narrative through gaming. And so we had the impetus. He found the impetus to get more funding because it was being taught in a classroom in a very unique way. Found the money for scholarships to fund the varsity teams, and I wasn't even involved. It was just one of those things that we raised the visibility of something that could have such a recruitment impact where IT could be very connected. And it became this thing that grew on its own. And so that is what refreshes me, that it's this really cool thing at UTC that's impactful now. And I didn't do it. It was just because it became something we focused on and we raised awareness to. So that's how I get refreshed.
That's nice. I think, do you have an esports team at Ole Miss? And I think
do.
Call of Duty is one of their is one of the games that are teams that they've got. You said something kind of going back earlier. Sometimes being a good leader, and I've had to figure this out myself. In my CEO, I don't remember if he said it or we went through a program together and someone said it, but it's always stuck with me when you said you don't have to be always involved, and sometimes you shouldn't be. Sometimes it's best to let your team do the thing, whatever the thing is. But this and whether it was I'll just attribute it to Trent. But either he or somebody else said, just because you are the best person in the organization at ordering pizza does not mean you need to order the pizza, right? I was like, man, that makes sense. Because sometimes you see them and you're like, hey, don't. Sometimes you just have to let them do the thing the way they need to do the thing, and then it frees you up to do other things. I like that, but I agree with you. When you see your team do something, especially when you've had to have little input into it, man, it's nice to see them thrive, right? That's good. That's good stuff. There's some young ladies, some young men who are just coming through the ranks. What is some advice that you can give that next generation of IT leadership as they're coming up?
I've done a lot in my career. I've focused pretty heavily on women in technology, right? Keeping diverse audiences and women in technology. So one of the things I always say to up and coming leaders, especially women, always take a seat at the table, right? Whenever you come into a room where you feel like you're outranked, the tendency is to sit back and always take a seat at the table. Always be there early enough to have a seat at the table. And then when you have that seat, make your voice be heard and part of the other voices. Not just to hear yourself talk, but a voice that adds value, which involves quite a bit of listening to figure out where you add that value. And that would always be something that I tell up and coming leaders. But there's also an aspect of it's hard for IT people because we're so analytical that we want you to know when we're starting to talk, when someone's presenting a problem, we immediately go into the how. How can we solve that problem? It's like an escape room for us, right? Like, it's like, oh, you have this problem. I can solve this problem. I can solve it this way. But there's a couple of questions we need to answer before that. It's is that the right problem to be solving? Number one, is it worth us solving that problem before we get into solutioning? Because it's so easy for us to do that. And being able to articulate to our users and our partners how we make decisions and how we know it's a good decision, I think will always be something that IT people will always be challenged with, and something that we kind of have to step outside of ourselves to be able to answer that questions. I have been fortunate enough in my life to spend a lot of time with CFOs. And so I'm very business case driven. So every time a decision should be made, I want someone to run through options and then figure out how they're going to get to the best options. So that's something I would always want up and coming leaders to practice, is you're always presenting to a CFO. I'm always presenting to taxpayers, public institutions. I have to be accountable to parents, and I have to be accountable to taxpayers. And so when I make decisions, would that stand up to the parent test? And being accountable to your partners and to your stakeholders, to me, is very important, and something I would always teach.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in what you just said, because, and admittedly, I'm on the other side. We have a large cybersecurity firm, and we're on the other side as a partner, and we also do a lot with manufacturing, groups. I don't want to say anybody's name on here, but large IT manufacturers. Mm-hmm. They're always pushing new things, and they're great partners, right? They're great partners. But I think as a leader, and this kind of goes to what you're saying, a lot of times you have to realize just because we can solve a problem doesn't mean it needs to be solved. And I love that you said that. I was with a CIO in another state, and he said, I swear, this certain manufacturer, if I had a broken leg, they'd be like, 100 gig switch would probably fix that, know, and and I think that's the tendency of the industry from my side, is to, you're trying to sell a thing, a widget, a service, whatever it is. So coming even from this side, I appreciate you saying that for the upcoming leadership in IT, is make sure that whatever you're purchasing, make sure that whatever you're implementing, whatever you're architecting, is solving a real problem, and it's not just a problem that you're being told is a problem. So no, it's a good point. It's really good. Thank you for doing that. Mm-hmm. You don't hear that often enough, right? Because you get so excited solving problems. You're like, hey, that's great.
I'm still guilty of that too. So, right. So we just have to step back. I think it was, Purdue's on 14 years of frozen tuition. And so doing that every year, we sat down as a leadership team, and you really did have to make some really tough decisions.
Right. Cassie, did you have any other questions? I think that was my last question.
I don't think so. It's been such a nice conversation. Thank you, Vicki.
It has been.
Thank you. The time. Yeah, same. It went fast. So thank you.
Thank you for listening to the NSI podcast. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share the episode. Got questions or topics you want us to cover? Reach out. We'd love to hear from you. For more information, visit us at nextstepinnovation.com.